This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Your sausage McMuffin with egg didn't change. Your receipt did. The sausage McMuffin with egg extra value meal includes a hash brown and a small coffee for just $5. Only at McDonald's for a limited time.
Prices and participation may vary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Halloween Podcast. I am your host, Lyle Perez, and you're listening to episode 30 of our special series, The Dark Record, where we uncover history's eeriest stories, one strange and unsettling case at a time. We're still bringing you a brand new episode every single day as we count down to Halloween. Before we dive into today's story, I just want to say how much it means to Megan and me that you're here listening. We've put a lot of work into making The Dark Record both interesting and entertaining, and your support keeps it going. If you take a moment right now to leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts, it would help more than you know. Those reviews don't just tell other Halloween fans this is a show worth checking out, they also help us climb the rankings, which lets more people discover the Halloween Podcast. Thanks so much for doing that for us. Now let's get into today's episode. The sea has always been a place of mystery. It feeds, it kills, it inspires, and it terrifies. To those who've braved its waters, the ocean is both a promise and a threat. It has carried sailors to fortune, but it has also stranded them in the most desperate circumstances imaginable. Long before airplanes and satellites, when a ship went down, men were left at the mercy of the waves and of their own survival instincts. It is in that world of desperation that Edgar Allan Poe set his only novel, written in 1838, and within it, he planted one of the strangest literary coincidences in history. The next entry into the Dark Record, the Poe and Richard Parker coincidence. Let's begin. The narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket was not Poe's most popular work. Critics at the time dismissed it as rambling, dark, and incomplete. But like so much of Poe's writing, it lingers because of the shadows it leaves behind. The novel follows young Arthur Gordon Pym as he stows away on a whaling ship. What begins as a seafaring adventure quickly spirals into mutiny, shipwreck, and survival. Poe drags his characters and his readers through storm and starvation until nothing remains but the barest instinct to live. It is in the novel's most harrowing moment that Poe strikes his darkest note. 4 men adrift in a lifeboat are left with no food, no water, and no chance of rescue. The ocean is endless, the sun merciless. To live, they must do the unthinkable. They draw lots to see which one of them will die so the others can survive. The lot falls to the youngest among them, a cabin boy. His name is Richard Parker. Poe describes his death and the cannibalism that follows in brutal detail, making no attempt to shield readers from the horror. At the time, it seemed like a work of imagination, morbid, unsettling, but fiction all the same. Poe was fascinated with the macabre, and his choice of the name Parker likely raise no eyebrows. Yet, in naming that doomed cabin boy, Poe unknowingly set the stage for one of the most chilling coincidences ever recorded. Nearly 50 years later, reality would mirror fiction in a way that still unsettles historians and readers alike. Another shipwreck, another lifeboat, and another cabin boy named Richard Parker. Only this time, the horror would be real. Long before Poe put pen to paper, sailors already knew the terrible phrase that haunted every long voyage, the custom of the sea. It was a grim tradition, whispered in harbors and passed down among seamen, though rarely admitted to openly. The idea was simple, but horrifying. When a crew was stranded without food, with no hope of rescue, and death certain for all, the weakest among them could be sacrificed so that the others might live. It was not considered murder in the usual sense. Instead, it was seen as necessity. The men would draw lots, sometimes straws, sometimes scraps of paper, and fate would decide who would die. In some cases, the decision didn't even require chance. The youngest, the sickest, or the least useful was chosen without ceremony. The act was brutal, but in the eyes of many sailors, it was survival. Stories of it circled port towns in hushed tones, always with the weight of shame, but also with the inevitability of nature's cruelty. The practice was not new. Accounts from the 17th and 18th centuries described desperate crews who admitted afterward to eating their own. One famous case involved the wreck of the Essex in 1820, a whaling ship rammed by a sperm whale in the Pacific. Survivors later confessed to drawing lots and consuming the flesh of those who had lost. Another case in 1846 told of the ship Francis Spaight, where a cabin boy was chosen and killed so that his shipmates could live. These tales spread across the maritime world, feeding the terror of every man who set sail across oceans that could turn hostile without warning. This is the world Poe was writing into. He didn't invent the horror, he borrowed it. By naming his fictional victim Richard Parker, he gave the tradition a face and a name. For readers, it was shocking. For sailors, it was all too real. They knew that once hunger took hold and thirst clawed at the throat, the line between civilization and savagery could vanish in an instant. The custom of the sea was never formally written into law, but it lingered in a strange, moral gray area. Courts often showed mercy when survivors confessed to cannibalism, recognizing the extremity of their circumstances. But the very existence of this unwritten rule only made the coincidence that would follow all the more chilling. When the yacht Mignonette sank in 1884, the sailors who climbed into its lifeboat carried more than their fear of starvation. They carried with them centuries of whispered tradition, and one name destined to echo Poe's fiction. In May of 1884, a small yacht called the Mignonette set sail from England, bound for Australia. The vessel was never meant for such a journey. Built for short coastal trips, it was lightweight and fragile, and its owner's decision to transport it halfway across the world was risky at best. Still, 4 men agreed to make the voyage. There was Captain Tom Dudley, his mate Edwin Stevens, a sailor named Edmund Brooks, and the youngest among them, a 17-year-old cabin boy named Richard Parker. For the first weeks, the voyage went smoothly. But on July 5th, while crossing the South Atlantic, the yacht was struck by powerful waves and began to sink. The men managed to escape into a lifeboat, carrying with them 2 tins of preserved turnips and little else. No water, no sails, no way of signaling for help. They were alone in one of the vastest stretches of ocean on Earth. The first days were survivable. They rationed what little food they had, cutting the turnips into small pieces, stretching every bite as long as possible. At one point, they managed to catch a sea turtle, which they ate raw. But soon, there was nothing left. The men grew weak, parched by thirst and burned by the relentless sun. In desperation, Parker drank seawater, a fatal mistake. Within days, he collapsed, slipping into unconsciousness as his body failed. On the 20th day adrift, Dudley and Stevens made the choice. With Parker lying helpless in the bottom of the lifeboat, they agreed that he must die so the others might live. They stabbed him with a penknife, and the 3 survivors, Dudley, Stevens, and Brooks, fed on his body. The decision was brutal, but in their minds, it was the only option left. It was the custom of the sea, the grim tradition every sailor knew, but none wanted to face. For 4 days they sustained themselves this way, until on July 29th, a German ship spotted their lifeboat and brought them aboard. The men were weak, skeletal, but alive. Their ordeal at sea was over. But as news of their survival spread, so too did the details of what had happened, and the name of the boy who had been sacrificed. Richard Parker. The coincidence was too strange to ignore. Nearly 50 years after Poe had imagined a cabin boy by the same name suffering the same fate, history had repeated itself. And soon, the horror of the sea would become the drama of the courtroom.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Your sausage McMuffin with egg didn't change. Your receipt did. The sausage McMuffin with egg extra value meal includes a hash brown and a small coffee for just $5. Only at McDonald's for a limited time.
Prices and participation may vary.
Do you love the strange, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying? Horrifying History takes you on a chilling journey into the dark corners of the past, where history and horror collide. From haunted places and ghostly legends to unsolved mysteries and terrifyingly true stories, you will uncover the twisted facts that history books leave out. Who were the real monsters behind infamous legends? What dark secrets lie buried in the pages of history? Every episode, we reveal the eerie truths that will send shivers down your spine. Are you brave enough to face the darkness? Horrifying History, available now wherever you listen to your podcasts. But don't wait for too long. The past might just come looking for you. Listen if you dare.
When the survivors of the Mignonette returned to England, their ordeal should have ended with sympathy. Shipwrecks were not uncommon, and survival cannibalism had been admitted in courts before. But this case struck a nerve. Perhaps it was the youth of Richard Parker, just 17 years old. Perhaps it was the frankness with which the men admitted to killing him before he had even died naturally. Whatever the reason, the British legal system decided to take a stand. Captain Dudley and First Mate Stevens were charged with murder. Brooks, who had not participated directly in the killing, was spared. The trial that followed in late 1884 became one of the most important in English legal history. R.V. Dudley and Stevens. For the first time, the court was asked to decide whether necessity, killing one to save many, could ever be a defense for murder. The case gripped the public. Newspapers printed every detail, and the eerie echo of Poe's novel only added to the fascination. Here were real men, stranded at sea, facing the same nightmare choice that Poe had imagined decades earlier. And just as in the novel, the name of the victim was Richard Parker. Was it coincidence, fate, or something darker that seemed to haunt the waves? The court's decision was clear. Necessity, no matter how desperate, could not justify the taking of an innocent life. Dudley and Stevens were found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. The sentence was later commuted to 6 months in prison, but the precedent had been set. From that moment on, English law drew a hard line. Survival was no excuse for killing. The case is still studied today in law schools as the defining moment when morality outweighed necessity. But outside the courtroom, the legend took on a life of its own. The strange coincidence of Poe's fiction and Parker's death was retold in magazines and whispered in seafaring communities. Over time, the name Richard Parker became something of a ghost itself, drifting through maritime history. In 1846, decades before the Mignonette, another Richard Parker was killed in a mutiny at sea. In 1884, this Richard Parker was sacrificed in a lifeboat. And in 2001, author Jan Martel chose the name for the tiger in his novel Life of Pi, a deliberate nod to the uncanny string of tragedies. The story leaves us with more questions than answers. Did Poe stumble upon a name that fate had marked? Or was Richard Parker simply common enough to appear again and again, taking on significance only because of the horrors tied to it? The ocean keeps its secrets, and perhaps this is one of them. What we are left with is a story where fiction and reality collided, where prophecy and coincidence blurred, and where a boy's name became forever tied to one of the strangest episodes in maritime history. As I read through this case, I couldn't help but think about how much weight we give to coincidence. Was it simply chance that Poe chose the name Richard Parker, or is there something in us that looks for patterns where none exist? I've always been fascinated by how history and story overlap, how sometimes a detail that seems like pure imagination shows up later in the real world. It makes you wonder, are these connections only visible because we search for them? Or do they point to something larger guiding the course of events? For me, the Richard Parker story is less about Poe predicting the future and more about how fragile the line is between fiction and fact. At sea, the unimaginable becomes reality, and in that desperate setting, even a name can echo through time in ways that feel almost supernatural. That brings us to the end of episode 30 of The Dark Record. We followed the chilling path from Poe's imagination to the deck of the Mignonette, where life imitated art in the most horrifying way possible. A fictional cabin boy and a real one, both named Richard Parker, lost to the same desperate fate, remembered, retold, and now added to the record. Next time, we turn from the sea to the hills of Pennsylvania, where superstition, murder, and fear combined in what became known as the Hex Hollow Murder. Until then, I'm Lyle Perez, and this has been the Halloween Podcast presenting The Dark Record. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps keep the show alive and weird. You can also explore sources, extras, and more at our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Halloween Podcast or at our website, thehalloweenpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. Keep your eyes on the shadows. And remember, Richard Parker lived first in Poe's pages, then in history's horror. Have a good night.
Your sausage McMuffin with egg didn't change. Your receipt did. The sausage McMuffin with egg extra value meal includes a hash brown and a small coffee for just $5. Only at McDonald's for a limited time.
Prices and participation may vary.
Do you love the strange, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying? Horrifying History takes you on a chilling journey into the dark corners of the past, where history and horror collide. From haunted places and ghostly legends to unsolved mysteries and terrifyingly true stories, you will uncover the twisted facts that history books leave out. Who were the real monsters behind infamous legends? What dark secrets lie buried in the pages of history? Every episode, we reveal the eerie truths that will send shivers down your spine. Are you brave enough to face the darkness? Horrifying History, available now wherever you listen to your podcasts. But don't wait for too long. The past might just come looking for you. Listen if you dare.